Yeah.
Latin America. Me dije que me siento.
Okay.
Sit next to him.
No, no, no. ¿Sí? Como quieres. Da lo mismo. Todos apagamos. Sí, ¿no?
Sí.
Puede ir directamente.
Bueno, igual pensemos en las masas de YouTube,
De toda esta gente.
del grupo de fans que tenemos.
Igual a toda esta gente que agradecerle
Sí.
porque después de la fiesta, después de la fiesta con el de arriba. Por
Okay,
no andar bajando y subiendo.
I I uh,
Ay, qué incómoda la petaca aquí atrás.
I welcome you to our very private session on the Spanish internet. Yeah. Thank you, thank you, thank you. So the first thing I wanted to say about the internet in Spanish is that this morning we had a debate on how many people actually spoke Spanish, and I think Eduardo rescued us with the finding that it's 400 million people who speak Spanish. Vite. Okay. So 400 million people who speak Spanish. That means that the Spaniards, if you take the population today, which is like 40 million, they convince 10 times the number of people who live there to speak Spanish, but they couldn't convince around 10% of the people who live there to speak Spanish. And so we have maybe 44 million people in Spain, out of which 40 million like to speak Spanish. And then there's another 360 million. So that's a especially large market, and we're going to talk about it with a panel that includes some of the largest disseminators of news and information on the internet in Spanish. And this would be Mariano, Enrique, maybe you want to raise your hand, Mariano, Enrique, and Eduardo. And then we have Joaquin, the entrepreneur who started Panoramio and sold it to Google. You know, when you're on Google and you look at those pictures and not Street View, which is just too much of the paparazzi van going everywhere, but these are pictures that are nice and taken by people who love it. And how many pictures have been uploading?
Total, I think it's around 15 million.
15 million.
Around.
Yes, so these are 15 million people, 15 million pictures that have been uploaded on Google, Google Maps, Google Earth. And then we have the investor here represented by RJ, who actually, when you listen to his English, you will think he doesn't speak Spanish, but he speaks it very well, okay? He has this strategy of confusing people by being originally American, but by now adopted. So we have the investor, the entrepreneur, the bloggers, but I would say even more than that, opinion makers in the field. And also we have represented different regions. We have Spain, we have Latin America in general, like Eduardo has a blog that is read throughout Spain and Latin America. Also Enrique gets a lot of readers from Latin America, right? Mariano is the top blogger in Argentina, but he also gets a lot of readers from outside of Argentina. So the one great thing about the Spanish language is scale, okay? Scale. When you start something in other European languages, you never get that scale. You know, when you have something in French or you have something in German or, well, if you have something in Danish or in Swedish or in Dutch, you just never get that scale that we get in Spanish. And so to start the panel, I wanted to ask RJ a little about the investment scene in the Spanish. Well, first, if you could tell us a little about Planeta, the company where you run the internet group at, and then the investment scene of the Spanish internet.
Sure. So I work in a company called Grupo Planeta, and we're the second or third largest media group in Spain. And our activity is principally in Spain, Latin America, and through an acquisition last year also in France. And over the last...
Just to clarify, you were saying that you were the largest or second largest book publishers in the world, right?
Right.
By number.
Last year, we acquired Editis. I believe it was the second largest French editorial company. And so with that acquisition, we're the largest book editor in the world. And in fact, the second largest in... Well, sorry, the first largest in the Spanish-speaking world and the largest in the world. So besides that activity in as a book editor, we're also active as a broad-based media company. We have TV, we have radio, we have newspapers, and also internet activity. So in the internet activity, I've been with the company approximately 9 years. And 9 years ago, the revenue through internet was effectively zero. It was starting to begin in a few projects. For example, Casa del Libro, which is a property of ours, which is the largest online bookseller in Spain, and continues to be. They were just starting their activity, but at that point there was no revenue from advertising or other sources. Today, the group has revenue of approximately 2 billion euros in total in all activities. Through the internet and digital media, the activity, both direct and indirect internet activity, is approximately 240 million euros. So we're not a group that puts a high emphasis on PR and promoting what we're doing. As a media company, or big media company, clearly there's things that we need to be doing differently and better, but the activity has increased significantly, and especially in the last few years. So the activity and the growth has come through taking advantage of existing assets and also through acquisitions. So your question about acquisitions for us, we bought one of the leading travel sites, we bought a number of e-commerce sites, and there's been significant activity over the last 2 to 3 years. In general in Spain, I think that what I'm seeing is the activity in 2008 was fairly robust in terms of investments in technology. I speak predominantly of internet, which is what I follow more. We do have one large investment in mobile as well. We bought 25% of what I believe is still the largest mobile content provider in the world, Zed. So the activity in principally in investments in the last year has been relatively strong. Just in Catalonia, there were 92 million euros in investments in 25 different companies.
No, that's pretty significant. I wanted to throw a question for the whole panel now, which is, does the Spanish culture exist? Or is it a mosaic of fragmented cultures in which when you start something, you have to build it again and again? For example, many times I get the sense that the European Union is not really the market people say it is, because even though goods could in theory move from here to there, I remember meeting James Murdoch last year, and I told him that I really would prefer to have Sky than to have Canal Satélite in Spain, because I prefer to get a lot of movies in not dubbed and so on. And when James wanted to send me the Sky, satellite dish and receiver and everything, then he found out it was illegal to send it to Spain. So even though in theory we have a common market, they're not allowed to ship to Spain when they ship the satellite receiver. So what I was wondering is if you could make a comment, maybe starting with you, Eduardo, of how do you see, because I know your blog is read more or less throughout, but other than that, when you try to advertise, when you try to promote things, is the Spanish market a market, or is it like a very, very loaded with barriers?
It happens, and there's a difference between Latin America and Spain first. But inside Latin America, there's a big difference between countries. For example, Ecuador, it's really, really different as to Argentina. And in fact, it's very, very difficult to sell advertising, but to reach all those people in every country, because they have, although they have the same language, they are really, really, really different, and the things that they find interesting are very different between, I don't know, maybe Mexico, for example, and Colombia. So it's, in fact, it's very fragmented, and there are people in Latin America that has a lot of money, and they have a very good online culture, but there are cases in South America especially that they don't know anything about the internet, and they think the internet is just MSN Messenger and High Five and maybe Facebook. They don't know there's a whole new world out there, sort of pick. But that's the main difference between probably Europe or the European Union, where people have a better status, so they have a better understanding of what is the internet. And Latin America, that is so different between countries, even though they speak the same language, but they have very different perceptions of the internet and how you can use the internet. Maybe in Spain, people are very active. They create blogs, they post online, they make videos. But in Latin America, people are like more passive. They just read, they just see videos. Maybe they create an online account in Facebook, but this is something like a status. I'm on Facebook, so I have friends.
What I found is, by just blogging myself, is that the word of mouth seems to work differently in Latin America. For example, I had almost no Mexican readers. And recently, I started looking, and I had these waves of Mexican readers, right? I mean, this is after 3 or 4 years that I've been blogging. So who knows what the hell happened in Mexico?
Maybe because you had a post about Mexico, I think, and people start finding you in
yeah,
search
well, I had a
engines.
post welcoming the Mexicans. Yeah, when I saw they were there, I said, "Hola, amigos mexicanos." But I was because in the internet we don't advertise, and these blogs grow. I mean, you guys have probably today you'll blog about this, and in a combined group, I'm sure way over 100,000 people who will know about this session and DLD in general. And but you never advertised, right? You never promoted your blogs. You never. So it's a mysterious word of mouth that happens between the different cultures of Latin America. But I thought, Enrique, maybe you'd like to comment about, do you think that the Spanish market is really a market, or more like a collection of different cultures who happen to speak Spanish?
I don't think it's a market at all. I think it's a completely, it's a full collection of very, very different, widely different markets with, I mean, in my case, think about it. I mean, in the middle of the night in Spain, Latin American traffic can be up to half of my readers. There's no way for me, it would be really tough, really hard for me to monetize that traffic. Every single advertiser that would come to my blog, always ask for Spanish IP addresses. And if I could run AdSense, but I don't do that. But it's the only thing I can do if I want to have something. So the markets are completely different. And the same way you can tell when you talk to someone in Spanish, you can tell where the person is from according to the accent and the pronunciation and everything. That happens also when you read it. So when you read, I read Eduardo, I read his personal blog, and also Altiz 40, I read Mariano. And for me, in my case, it's a way for me to get word of what's going on in those markets that are not so close to me, and for me are very interesting because after all, I'm a professor. I have lots of Latin American students, and I need to know about that. But if it wasn't for that, I would be completely unaware of what's going on in Latin America. So I need that part of in my blog role. I need those blogs to get word of what's going on there. Otherwise, I get completely closed in the Spanish reality.
But yet, for Telefónica, for example. By the way, does everybody have their phones off? I just hear this noise here. Telefónica, for example, Banco Santander, BBV, Telefónica has the largest market capitalization of all the telcos of Europe because they went into Latin America, and for them it is one market, right? And including Brazil, and they're even worth a little more than Deutsche Telekom. So some companies have been able to capitalize the concept of the Spanish market, right?
But they are not content companies.
Yes.
Well,
They are service companies.
Telefonica take advantage of the privatization of all the telcos in Latin America, and this is why they have this strong advantage over almost any other telco company in Latin America, except the Grupo Telmex, which is America. Well, it's Telmex and
Telmex
America.
is a very good example.
Yeah.
Also, I think of a company that has totally taken advantage of the Spanish markets, and Carlos Slim has a very, very good vision. He fails in everything he tries to do in North America, and he greatly succeeds in everything he tries to do in South America. So
Yeah.
there must be something that he understands. And
He's
I
very
met with
He
him.
understands that we live in crisis every single year.
Yeah.
So he buys cheap.
No, I met with him a few times, and he could barely speak English. That also explains a little about how the man who's at sometimes the richest man in the world, the second richest man in the world, or third richest man in the world, but he's been in that category for the last 3 years, is Mexican. He barely speaks English, and he only makes his money out of people who speak Spanish. And he's become the richest man in the world. So there has to be something that some people understand. But I agree that it's at a very high level. But then Planeta does a lot of business in Latin America. Prisa does a lot of business in Latin America.
But with content, with Eduardo said, there are some things that are equal in every single market. I mean, the iPod is the same in Argentina, in Mexico, and in Spain. So basically, when we write about some things that are global, we don't have barriers to entry. So if you analyze your stats, I have 25% of people visiting me from Mexico, 30% from Argentina, and 32% from Spain, which is weird because I write from Argentina. But the big problem is how can we monetize all this? How can we build a business on advertising? Because you have, as you said, different markets, and sometimes it's really weird the way the big media companies does business. For instance, I ran do you remember the advertising campaign for Nokia, I think? That it was hired by someone in Buenos Aires, but I had to make the invoice to someone in Mexico who paid me through a bank in Colombia for a company which is in Finland. And this is difficult for the small entrepreneur. I mean, and not all people is willing to do that effort to get one
I
campaign.
think one of the biggest obstacles for advertising in Latin America is the fact that e-commerce doesn't work in Latin America. I mean, one of the worst things about Latin America is the borders, the fact that people really believe in borders. They even believe in borders between Uruguay, Argentina, and Brazil. We're supposed to have this Mercosur. And so when it's very difficult to do a big e-commerce campaign. But having said this, there's an Argentine company that is on NASDAQ. Even now in the very depressed markets, Mercado Libre, I think it's still worth over $500 million. And they have managed to, there's not a single Spanish company that I can think of, a startup who went on NASDAQ. Well, actually, Justel did that, but then we went into the European markets. But it is remarkable how people struggle and create these companies. And they're worth, as I said, over $500 million. Then it was worth way over $1 billion recently. But then there's also the sort of dream entrepreneurial efforts, because there's a lot of people in this conference that I've spoken to who would dream to be like Joaquin, right? Who would be, the story of Panoramio is one of these beautiful internet stories that two guys somewhere in Valencia, and you're going to tell it better than I will, but you guys have an idea, why don't we put some pictures on Google Maps and Google Earth, and all of a sudden millions of people are doing this, and then Google buys your company and pays you a lot of money, takes you to Switzerland.
I think that actually...
Am I on the right track? Or?
Yeah, you are. Well, I think that actually ignorance is key. So if you ignore all those problems, that there are going to be some, cultural differences between different countries and everything. You just go ahead and safety works. I mean, I used to think that all Latin America was more or less the same. And I was surprised when a friend of mine created Fotolog in Argentina and actually succeeds. When the most successful Fotolog in Argentina. And it was actually because it was translated not to Spanish, to Argentinian. And it's very different from Spanish. But something happened then. After a while, it grew, and actually it also dominated the Chilean market. So it's actually not that different. I think that you can just get into Latin America or Spain, Latin America, and there are much more similitudes than differences. It's like, you know,
But
Europe
what
and
you did in Panoramio truly became global, right? Because
yeah,
I've seen amazing pictures uploaded in Russia. Like sometimes before I travel, I go to Panoramio and I check, or you don't need to go to Panoramio, you go to Google Earth, and you see, or you go to Google Maps and you put more, where it says more, you put photos and you get Joaquin's photos. And I've seen incredible places. For me, sometimes with a big screen, you know, at home, we do this imaginary tourism. But I've seen that Panoramio has been able to get people from everywhere in the world to do that. So you obviously hit on something, working out of Spain, you hit on something totally global, right?
well, actually, it was very lucky that the content was extremely easy to localize. Again, we're talking about photos, so that's somebody that everybody understands. But I also remember when I internationalized Panoramio, so I allowed people to submit translations, and we got suddenly over 40 languages. And surprisingly, a good market for Panoramio was Eastern Europe, and I was not at all focusing on Eastern Europe. I think my theory is that we are basically one of the very few sites that had a translation for, you know, Eastern Europe. So we were one of the very few that were available there, and we got the market there. Here in Europe, it worked very well in Spain, in Germany, but not that well in France. I just think that sometimes, you know, there's just some initial irregularities that make that just something explodes in a country and
Like a
doesn't
like a
in
tipping
another
point.
one. Yeah, it's like Orkut. I mean, Orkut worked
Well,
very well in Brazil and in India, and it's not like it was written in Sanskrit or something, okay? So
But you have an advantage over Orkut, for example. Orkut, which is this very large social network owned by Google, which is extremely successful in Brazil, like I've seen, and you said India, I didn't know, and almost nowhere else. But you have an advantage, which is similar to, you know, the birds that carry the seeds, you know, when they move and migrate, which is that you don't need a person from France to take the pictures of France. If you have a Panoramio fan from Hungary, then he will go to France and take all the pictures in France and put them in Panoramio. So you found a way that even, I mean, I wish I had something like that at phone, where I could get a Hungarian, for example, which we do well in Hungary, to go to Greece, where we don't do well, take a Fonera and install it, you know, but they don't do that, you know. But in your case, they go from the countries where they are fans of your product, and then they go to another country, because when people travel, they're eager to take pictures, and they're more eager. Somebody sometimes lives in, and many times the people can't believe, say, I live in front of the dump and this horrible place, and somehow these foreigners think it's attractive.
well, actually, in Panoramio, one nice thing is that it's targeting people that travel, and well, people that travel will travel, so they move around, and it web spreads the page quite easily. But you kind of see the same effect on all the pages that have user-generated content. You know, like you take the Wikipedia, it's also very successful in plenty of languages. You take Facebook, it's hugely successful everywhere. So almost every user-generated content site can successfully be exported.
And how is the philosophy? I wanted to ask at Google vis-a-vis the Spanish-speaking world. Have you noticed? For example, I'll give you some moment. When I first met Chad Hurley at the conference called Sun Valley, and he had just started YouTube, I said to him, "You have to have YouTube in Spanish. You know, you have to have, and of course in any other language, in Chinese. They only had it in English, right?" And it took him like 2 years. It took YouTube like 2 years to be in Spanish or something like that. There seems to be that people are not so aware of the size of the internet in Spanish, right?
But YouTube had to make localized versions for each country. There's a Mexican version and there's a Spain version.
And the Argentine version.
And the Argentine
they
version.
are opening offices in every country.
Maybe because the people in YouTube see different content.
Yes.
Yeah.
I really think it's a mistake to wait until you succeed in a country to, you know, to
think the same,
try to
yes.
attack the country like this. I think it's better to just, well, internationalize your site and try to go there, see what works, and then just push. It's like, I mean, or could work in Brazil, okay? And it's not because they were opening an office in Brazil, you know, making some marketing or something. No, it just happened to succeed in Brazil, and then they went to Brazil.
And
You
then
know,
they make
yeah,
the
it's
site in
like-
Portuguese.
Yeah,
It
I
was in
mean,
English.
you don't see that, you know, I know where's it going to work.
Different because it was because it has some tipping point which I really don't know when it happens that Orkut happens to start growing in Brazil. It's the same thing that happens with MySpace. You go to Mexico and you have MySpace everywhere. You go to Argentina, and in Argentina, Facebook grew 20 times this year alone, just because Movistar, which is part of Telefónica, put it on the WAP as one of the WAP options. And you go to Peru and you have High Five.
Well,
and
in Colombia, Facebook is the most used social network, and I think it's one of the first countries in Facebook. Colombia is, I think, the third or the
Yeah.
fourth most used.
Well, in percentage, Chile has the most.
Yeah, the highest percentage of the
high-
population. When
Yeah.
Mark Zuckerberg came to Madrid, and we spoke about that. I was shocked that he said our number one country in the world is Chile, in terms of the percentage of people on Facebook. That it seems that the Chileans all went on Facebook, right?
Yes.
While in other countries, Sonico is doing well, High Five is doing well. Now, I wanted to ask you about the Obama effect, because there was a lot of dislike for the United States in this. You
Before
wanted to say
switch-
something? Okay,
Before
yes.
you switch to a different topic, I would like to I mean, and it's probably a question for the panel, because I believe the herding effects in the Spanish markets are bigger than in some others. The same way that Google has like 96% of the search market in Spain. This happens for some sort of herding effect, strong
Herd
herding
effect,
herd
yeah.
effect. So it's
Everybody going
Yep.
in the same direction.
yeah, so and I believe that this for Spanish markets is bigger, the same way that happened in Brazil. You have several prominent figures or key people entering, and the herd effect is huge.
No, you have a good point
I
there.
believe
Yeah,
this
that's
is a
true.
characteristic
That
of
it's
Spanish or Latino
there
markets.
seems to be very many cultures that seem to become fanatical about certain things. I think you mentioned Fotolog before, or I don't know if you, but Fotolog is like, the founders, I know, they're in New York, right? They started this thing, Fotolog, that it's kind of like something you would imagine is a guaranteed failure, because it's a site that only allows you to upload a picture a day. It's like a Flickr for the starving, right? And this thing became incredibly successful in Argentina, right? And not only that, but they started an urban tribe that was the floggers, the photologgers, the floggers that dress in a special way, that meet in special places. So I think Enrique is onto something important there, which is the herd effect, the fact that these are different cultures that fall in love with the product. That seems to be the Chileans fall in love with Facebook, the Brazilians fall in love with Orkut, the Spaniards in general with
Twitter.
Google.
Twitter is one of the top 10 cities. Madrid is one of the top 10 cities
In the world.
Yeah,
no,
in
and
the
I
world.
see you guys are. The other day I checked who are the people most follow on Twitter in the world, and you two were in that list, and I was somewhere at the end. But it is it's incredible. The Twitter thing in the Spanish world is incredible. Like when you look at the top, there's Spanish Twitterers are in the top followed in the world. Yeah, so that is also true.
It goes well with the Latino culture, this idea of getting together and sharing stuff and convincing you about, I mentioned something and you for some reason follow it more than I don't know, more than in Anglo-Saxon
Well, with
cultures.
Spotify,
Yeah,
this new
look at
music service,
Really
that
fast.
It's growing.
yeah,
I
I
blogged about
blogged,
Spotify like a year ago.
yeah, I
Yeah.
blogged about
Yeah.
Spotify in Spanish, and Daniel Ek, who started Spotify, he says thank you. He can't believe the amount of people that came from the Spanish world. Like Spotify is growing, I don't know, 2/3 of his company or half of his company. And yeah, it's true that when the Hispanic people fall in love, they fall in love, you know, and they like something, and they're very difficult to move them away from that product. I think we're onto something there. And now I wanted to go back to the issue of Obama, because I think that everybody hated Bush, not just in Latin America, but people really are, I think, having very, very positive reactions toward Obama. And I think that has some effect, and I'm going to ask you if you agree with me. But when I would ask people like, why are social networks other than Facebook thriving in Latin America or in Spain, or people would say, well, this is our own, or 20, this very successful Facebook-like product in Spain. Like my son Tom was telling me that his friends left Facebook and went to 20 because 20dad is our thing, and Facebook is sort of the foreigners or the Americans. So there is some element of nationalism or pride. So the question is, now that Obama is there, and so quickly the image of America has changed, do you think this will, well, first of all, do you think there was some negativity towards American sites because of the politics of the United States? And do you think this will change now with Obama?
I think in Mexico the negativity towards United States because of Bush was really big. Maybe if you go to the south, that it's not that strong as Mexico, because the main problem in Mexico, well, one of the main immigration problems in the United States is Mexican people coming to the States. So there is some kind of friction in Mexico, but I don't think that's the same in Colombia or Ecuador. I think it's just the opposite. I think people in South America would like to be more like an American, while people in Mexico would like to be less like an American because of the way Bush treated immigrants.
Well, in Argentina, you know, our president says that Obama reminds her his husband. So
reminds her of her husband.
Yeah, who was our former president.
I
so
see.
now I think
why
we
would
love
that be? I don't see the resemblance.
Well, neither do I, but she said so, and suddenly people start.
That's meant to be a compliment.
Yeah.
Yes.
Oh, I see.
Yeah.
I see.
Now I realize that. But I think there is a changing attitude towards the states.
Yeah, but I don't think that will have any effect whatsoever on international enterprise. I mean, it's not like when people go to Google in Spain, oh, fucking Americans, have to go to. No, they're not connecting like those companies with America most of the time. So they just use Facebook or 20. I mean, in Spain, why do people use 20s like the Facebook Spanish-like version? Why do they go to 20? I mean, at least people are 20 years old instead of Facebook. It's not because it's Spanish, it's because there are girls there, no girls, plenty. So, and you know, that's the main factor. I don't think it's because the enterprise is here or there, or the founders are from this country or this other country. It's like, if I ask you, can you guess what's the most, you know, the city that gives us to Panorama the most visitors per day? Do you know what's the city? No, can you tell me? Maybe Madrid, you know, Berlin. No, it's Istanbul.
Istanbul.
Yeah, my first reaction was, dude, they have computers. Yeah, well, just happens. I mean, I don't think that people really are using software because, you know, they are in this country or this other. You really have to be very visceral.
Well, but the people who manage the I read reports of the people who manage the largest American brands like Coca-Cola, Microsoft, whatever, and they were talking about a negative effect on their brands because of the Bush. But I agree with you, most people, but you see companies, 5% or 10% moves their needle. Their shares can go up, 50% or 30% over 5% or 10% of increases, decreases in gross margin, and we see that a lot. No, I've seen a strong dislike of the United States in Argentina, for example. in the Bush presidency, and I also hope that changes. But I also wanted to ask more about Spain now, Enrique. And do you think that the Spanish reader, to what extent do you think that your Spanish readers read you because you bring them news that they don't search in the original language, meaning that they're not bilingual, and you just bring them news that they cannot read in other languages? Or to what extent do you think they read you because you have original content and that it's centered around things in Spain?
I think original content is key, and it's hard to find in Spanish. Many people, including myself in many cases, we go to English-speaking sites, we read interesting news, and we, in my case, I don't translate. What I do is I decide to comment on something when I have something to say, when I have something to add, when I can put together some sort of framework or some experience or some consulting I did, as a project I did with another company or something else. Otherwise, if I can't add anything, I don't like just translating. But the funny thing is that, I always point or link to English-speaking sites, no problem with that. But as soon as you start quoting, if I quote someone and it's more than 3 lines of text, I always get comments with, please could you translate? Just like, come on, it's 3 lines of text. Anyone can get it, or you can just mark it and take it into Google Translator or something and you will get the hang of it. But no, there's always people asking for, please could you put it in Spanish?
Well,
so yeah, there's
that's something that we from Latin America are surprised when we go to Spain, that Spain believes that they are fighting other languages. And not only that, they believe they're fighting the languages inside Spain. And for us, all over Latin America, we don't mind adopting foreign words. We don't mind mixing the language. And especially we pronounce the foreign word. We try to pronounce the foreign words in the original language to distinguish them from the Spanish words. While the Spaniards from Spain look down on you if you pronounce the foreign words like they're pronounced in the original language, and then they make like pijama, garaje, and they tried Wi-Fi,
Right.
and so.
What do you say?
No, what I'm trying to say is that there's a cultural. They sometimes see this not as a globalized culture where we're all trying to learn. I see this in my blog a lot. The moment I put an English word, couldn't you find the word in Spanish for that?
Of course, yes.
I'm like, fuck it, yeah, I could, but would sound so weird, But there's the Latin Americans do not demand the purity of language. They do not demand. They say, okay, there's a world that speaks English. I wish I spoke it well, and let's just that's something I have seen, but actually Spain has made me learn more Spanish, that's for sure.
Yeah, there's always a dictionary troll. The dictionary troll that goes, whenever, I write the same way I speak. And I speak, and probably I teach more in English than in Spanish these days. So I use lots of words in English, introduce lots of words in English when I speak or when I write. And there's always complainers, always people saying, hey, there's a word for that, and so on and so forth. Yeah.
I wanted to say a couple of things before I forget. One is that Pablo Larguia is here in the audience, and he's organizing a conference on June 16th, which will be sort of like a DLD type conference, but in Spanish, about the internet in Spanish, and anybody who's interested in that can contact Pablo. I also wanted to mention that both Enrique and I teach at Instituto de Empresa, which is another success story from Spain, in the sense that you've been teaching there for how many years?
19 almost.
19 years, wow.
Yeah.
I thought me with 11, I was like such a veteran. The Instituto de Empresa MBA program, an international MBA program, has been ranked, fourth or in Europe, or third in...
Second in Europe, and for the last one, seventh. The one that was
seventh
published.
in the world.
Seventh in the world.
Yeah, so there are global, just like Panoramio is a global Spanish global success story. when I teach, which we both teach internet technology, when we teach in Spain, the craziest thing that happened to me last year is I did not even have a single student from Spain. I mean, this became such an international institution that then it was irrelevant to be in Spain. My students were Chinese, Russians, Americans, Latin Americans. So there are moments in the Spanish world that it's absolutely irrelevant where you are. And the same is true of Barcelona. Barcelona is a city that sometimes you say, well, where am I? Because they have the GSM Congress, they have so there are moments in which the opposite happens. Just like there's moments where somebody drives you nuts over a stupid word that you didn't put in Spanish, there's some other moments where Spain, you could be anywhere, where it's the most globalized country in the world, right? And that happens a lot to Argentina too. I've seen going lately that there's some companies that bring their headquarters for all the Latin America operations to Argentina. So I don't want to give the impression that this is a fragmented, difficult world. It sometimes is, but some other times, like Instituto de Empresa, like Google, and a lot of other things we see, it is the Spanish world is very much part of the global culture, right? Okay, we have a couple of minutes left. If somebody has any questions about the Spanish internet, you can please raise your hand. Yes.
Just one thing regarding this headquarters going to Argentina, for instance. They are doing a lot of geographic arbitrage. And do you remember Damian?
Yes,
they
from
are
Fox.
Yes. From Fox. Now they are part of Fox, but they run all the digital advertising business for Fox networks from Argentina to all Latin America and the rest of the world except the United States. So, for instance, they run Asia from Argentina, they run Singapore, Turkey, and a lot of countries. And they are opening a lot of offices there.
But what do you mean by geographical arbitrage? I didn't get that.
Lower cost and international
The
people.
quality of people.
Yeah,
and
the quality
cost.
of people is really good.
Yeah, but there's nothing wrong with that. I mean,
No.
to be competitive.
For me, it's great. I mean,
there's no complaint about that. So there was a question there. Yes. Yeah, there's a microphone.
As far as we've understood here from the discussion, it is the Spanish-speaking market speaks Spanish, but moreover, there are lots of differences and differences that might have not been so concrete in that discussion. Still, I would like to ask you again if you could name maybe from your stomach, key success factors for online businesses in the Spanish-speaking market. Is there something, or on the other hand, if that's easier, what is there to be done wrong? What can you do wrong for not succeeding? That would be interesting, if there's something common.
Yeah, good question, RJ. You want to take a crack at that?
Yeah, sure. I think that when we talked about the differences, and especially that was from a content standpoint, I think from the standpoint of making money, either on the media side through advertising or through e-commerce, there are challenges. And we talked about some of those in e-commerce. You gave the one example of someone who seems to be doing well in Latin America and Mercado Libre.
Yes.
But in general, for example, in our case, in e-commerce, it's been challenging, but it doesn't mean that we're giving up or that there's not an opportunity. It's just the ability to, e-commerce has some specific complexities, with payments, with dealing with fraud, dealing with logistics.
Customs.
With customs. So I think on the e-commerce side, I think there is opportunity, and I think there's going to be growing opportunity, but it's going to be the people that can understand the different cultures and the way to sort of sift through the complexity. On the advertising side, where we've grown significantly, I think that there's a couple challenges or problems. One of which is the infrastructure of agencies that handle the big brands. There isn't this sort of pan-anything mentality. I've talked to people, and we've actually had a couple campaigns related with folks in burda of big advertisers that were doing pan-European campaigns. Okay, there's not as many yet as we'd all like, but at least there's movement. But for example, in Asia, there's nobody that's, in Latin America and in Spanish, there's nobody that's been able to figure out how to sort of take advantage of these opportunities and get some sort of...
well, there's a business for you.
Yeah. So I would say that there's opportunities on the advertising side, clearly. There are a few companies that are doing very, very well on traffic arbitrage. I think your friends that you mentioned at Fox, Damien, and so on the advertising side, there's complexities. There's people that are making money and taking advantage of the inefficiencies. Tends to be more on the remnant side or on the unsold inventory. And I think that there's a lot of opportunities for companies that especially can utilize technology in online advertising to take advantage of a huge amount of traffic and quality traffic that's not being sold.
Yeah, there's also OLX. I just wanted to mention OLX. There's this company in Argentina that is very big in India, in Russia, in China. They copied Craigslist basically, and they made it global, but for profit. And I was at their offices in Buenos Aires, and again, it was like the United Nations. They had people, and I asked them, how do you get people to move to Argentina? And actually, they get people from all over the world to move to Argentina. I was very surprised. Yes.
Hola, hombres. First, thank you for having you. It's really insightful, and I'm quite happy. I think the rest of this team here as well, sharing your knowledge. What I've learned is there's no such thing than one Spanish market. But my entrepreneurial brain tells me that there are 420 million potential clients. So, which is the Spanish-speaking market where I can make money in? I just want to hear a name.
Well, I just to answer this, you mean a name in a country? Which country?
Yes. I mean, Carlos Slim makes money in Mexico.
Yes,
That's
he
fine
certainly
with me.
became the wealthiest man in the world, depending on the day, operating out of Mexico, but mostly Mexico, but now through the Spanish-speaking world, and Telefónica became the fourth most valuable company in the world, telecom company operating out of Spain, the Spanish banks. I think at the level of smaller companies, I'll give my opinion, you guys give your own, but I think Mexico is a very big market. It's a very special market. Certainly Brazil is a huge market, which for people who speak Spanish from Latin America, they think the Portuguese and the Spanish is like almost the same, and everybody my Brazilians and Argentines make business in each other country, and I would consider Brazil certainly enormous in a GDP that is probably that of Spain. Well, certainly Spain is, I built 2 companies in Spain. In Spain, when you build companies, they can quickly be worth €500 million, €1 billion. It is a sizable market, Spain. I invested in this other company, Olia, that got to be worth €700 million in like 4 years. So there is size in Spain. Maybe Spain is half a Germany, but certainly Spain plus the other Spanish markets are like maybe 2 Germanys, something. It's a sense of that. But there's some other markets that are extremely difficult, and I don't know if I would get into Venezuela or do things in Venezuela with also the politics there. Which are your best markets?
Well, for us, clearly Spain, because that's where we're focused. We acquired a company a little less than 2 years ago in Colombia, El Tiempo, and this is the largest media company there, and I was absolutely blown away when I saw what they were doing specifically in internet. They have 13 portals. This is data from 6 or 7 months ago. 13 different portals in motor, employment, classifieds. They had 130 million page views. They had 42% market share, and 50% of all Colombians pass through every month one of their sites. So this is a very, very small company, or a very, very, very small country, but a company, and I think actually one of the leading media groups in the world for exploiting digital media in their market. So that, I would say, in market share terms is a real success. In absolute terms, not as much. One other market that we haven't talked about that's huge is the Hispanic market in the U.S.
Yes.
one of the areas that's both offline and online is significant for us is education, and we've been very, very successful using the internet to get leads to sell products in various levels of education, from sort of technical training to MBA programs, distance learning. And we did some tests, this is about a year ago, in the US in the Hispanic market, and I was blown away by all aspects of that market, the size of the market, the money that was being moved. On the advertising standpoint, I've been involved with online advertising for nearly 10 years, and the highest CPMs and the lowest level of availability for inventory was in the Hispanic market in the US.
Hispanic market, yeah, it's a very good answer, because it's like, I also understand the Hispanic market is the GDP of Spain as well.
Right.
It's like $1 trillion. And with that, I wanted to thank you very much for participating, and thank you guys for listening to us. And if you think of Latin America and the Spanish market, I think there are very sizable opportunities to invest and make money. Thank you.